Our meat. Anne-Marie actually led that. And when I met Anne-Marie, I said, how come we're not doing a Power of Produce? That's the most important report we could ever do. So Anne-Marie and I collaborated, put it out. It's now our most popular report and really provides the industry with a lot of information. So I just wanted to open up by saying thank all of you for everything you're doing every day to help make people's lives a little better. Make sure they're eating healthy and nutritious food and following the dietary guidelines. And I can't thank you enough. Anne-Marie, why don't you kick it off, and we'll do our normal shtick, right?
All right, off it goes. Well, good morning, everybody. And as Rick mentioned, we are up to year 8. There's my slide. So for those of you that might be a newbie in the room, what we do every single year is we really try to understand the why behind the numbers that come out of the IRI world and, of course, of all of your worlds as well. So we ask consumers everything that we can think of relative to where they shop, why they buy things, how do they plan their meals, what are their sources of meal inspiration, etc. But we also know that when people answer surveys, that tends to be with their aspirational selves, whereas they shop with their economic and realistic selves. So we make sure that all of our answers are always overlaid with that IRI data so that we see both sides of the coins as well. But it really is a 360 look at our end of the world, and it is made possible by the SEPC, Euresic Label, and InvaFresh. So the full report, as you can imagine, if we drill consumers for 15 minutes, is a good 40 pages with a lot of detail in it. It'd be impossible to cover that today. So what we're going to do is really hit the highlights of the report and give you a snapshot of what is available. And with that, of course, we have some wonderful experts that are going to overlay their opinions under the guidance of Rick. So Rick, you want to introduce the panel?
Yeah, so let me introduce some folks. Immediately to my left is Mike Emery, Director of Produce at Hannaford Supermarkets. Mark is currently the Director of the Produce Category, Pricing and Merchandising at Hannaford Supermarkets. His responsibilities include sales development, supplier relations, net contributions to management, procurement and replenishment of product, as well as develop the merchandising strategy of produce with the scope of responsibility of all the Hannaford stores across multiple states and numerous competitive marketing. And in your spare time, you sleep, right?
Every now and then.
Yeah. And then next is Jeff Cady, VP of Produce and Floral at Tops Markets. Jeff recently been promoted to VP of Produce and Floral for Tops Markets, having served as Director of Produce and Floral since 2014. He began his career in 1986 in Akron, Ohio, working for Giant Eagle. In 1990, he started with Finast. In 1996, Tops and Finast merged, so he began his career at Tops. His corporate career began in 2002 when he relocated from Ohio to Rochester, New York as the Produce and Floral Specialist. Thanks for joining us today, Jeff.
Welcome.
And last, over on the left, but not least, Rich Gonzalez, VP of Global Sourcing at Walmart. Rich Gonzalez is Vice President of Produce Sourcing for Walmart USA and Walmart International banners. He has worked his entire career in produce and brings diverse perspectives throughout the global supply chain. He has held supply-side roles in farming and harvesting, operations, logistics, finance, manufacturing, product management, and marketing. Prior to joining Walmart, Rich spent 17 years working 3 industry-leading suppliers in citrus, packaged salad, vegetable, and tree fruit segments. Thanks for joining us, Rich. This is going to be a fun panel today.
Absolutely. So we're going to kick it off with some insights into produce. And Rick, you alluded to a couple of these statistics. It's really, really important to win in produce, not just for the financial benefit of everybody here in the room, whether you're a grower, shipper, processor, or a retailer. But at the end of the day, produce is one of the most important reasons why consumers pick one store over another. At the end of the day, of course, location, price, assortment, those are the big threes. But when you look at the departments across the store that drive a consumer to shop one place or another, it is produce hand in hand with meat that really drive that decision. So winning in produce really means winning for the total store. So what did 2022 look like? Well, it was another unusual year, if you want to call it that. But in the end of the day, we went from almost $61 billion in 2017 all the way to $75 billion as a retail group in the fresh produce department. So it was really inflation, of course, as we all know, that drove that dollar gain, but at the same time, our volume was down a little bit, and that's what we're seeing really across departments. There is very, very few categories where volume is indeed keeping up with last year as well as pre-pandemic. But what we're seeing in the produce category is, yes, we were down year over year. Last year we were down a little bit, but the number of pounds that we push through the retail channels continues to sit well ahead of 2019. So if we think about the fact that we're looking at significant inflation and keeping our pounds the same, that is certainly not a bad place to be in. Here you see the numbers broken out by fruit and veg. As you can see, dollars up both sides, especially for fruit, that in the beginning, the first half of 2022, had very robust inflation, and volume is really down for both, leveling out to that minus 3.8% for the total fresh fruit department. Underlying drivers, at the end of the day, we can grow sales three which ways. We can either have more people shop, we can have people shop more often, and we can have them buy more per trip. What we're seeing is that we actually did pretty well in terms of our household penetration. It was nearly flat. And if you figure that we still have that competition coming out of farmers markets, those types of outlets, minus 0.3, that means we continue to have very high household penetration in fresh produce. What's really interesting is the number of trips. We are getting people into the store. That is unique. Most departments are seeing people less often. We're also getting people to spend a little bit more in terms of their spend per trip and spend over the year. The problem is, as we just looked at those inflation numbers, we are not keeping up with the inflation. So in other words, people are buying fewer units, they're buying a little bit less pounds, all in order to balance that budget at the end of the week, the end of the month, and the end of the year. Here you see that produce inflation. All in all, our numbers were up 9.1% over a year ago. And when we compare those prices versus 2019, our pre-pandemic normal, we're sitting at about 16%. Now you see a lot of other numbers here, total food and beverages, much, much higher inflation at 12% year over year and 23% versus 2019. Lo and behold, our inflation was actually less than what we see in frozen and canned, and yet every single month when we ask consumers, where are you seeing a lot of inflation? Well, of course, eggs leads the list, but it's shortly followed by meat and produce, which both have below average inflation. So it's really that perception that people continue to have of fresh items being a little bit more expensive. It also meant that we did not gain any share despite the fact that we were the better value in terms of how prices increased. And if we look over the last couple of years versus frozen and versus canned, the number of dollars associated with those departments really ended up being very similar to the numbers that we saw in prior years. Huge seasonal swings in the summer. Fresh tends to have a little bit more penetration, and of course in the winter months we see a little bit more, especially during the holidays as well. Very uneven performance too relative to the top 10 in growth. So we don't look at the top 10 in sales, but which department, which categories added the most new dollars to the department. You see berries on top with an additional $527 million. Now you see a couple of circles, and those circles are the items where it wasn't just inflation, but it was also the actual demand that drove all those new dollars. So in other words, the growth percentage in dollars was higher than the growth percentage in inflation. So that would be berries, grapes, and cucumbers. Everything else grew because of inflation in the top 10. So talking about uneven performance, what we're seeing across every single category, including produce, is that idea of the migration trends starting to have a big impact on your performance. For those of you that are distributed nationally or maybe located in states that are in the Southeast has been outperforming the national average in many other regions for a while now. And if we think about the fact of where the migration patterns have moved, with an additional 4 or 5 million people in areas like Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, what have you, that is really starting to also shift the dollar around in produce and everywhere else. We're also seeing very uneven performance as it relates to channels, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind. For a long time in meat and produce, this traditional supermarket, the grocery channel, was really that held the majority dollar, still does. 42% of all fresh produce dollars move through that traditional grocery channel. However, if we compare that to what happened in 2019, you see that the traditional grocery channel is down. By far not down as much as we see in seafood and frozen and meat, but we are losing a little bit of that fresh produce share to outlets like mass, club, and online as well. So talking about online real quick, what we're seeing is that the number of households buying online is starting to level off. But we continue to see a little bit more people also buying produce at that higher rate. So the frequency is still an area where we are winning in online, and it continues to be a big gap between the different demographics. We continue to see high uptake in online shopping among millennials, especially those that are hybrid workers, maybe working from home, are able to receive the groceries while they're there. Continue to see that income gap and continue to see really along the coasts and the bigger cities where we see more online shopping and then in store. Looking at crystal ball real quick before I kick it over to Rick, a lot of people believe that for the most part they're going to buy online as much as they did before. And more often 34% or 35%. So we're not going to see huge growth there, but it is still an area of growth for years to come. So our biggest charge there is how do we convert, make sure that fresh produce ends up into the total basket, but also how do we merchandise online the way we do in store. Rick, over to you.
Okay, so I think we'll talk about performance. Mike, I'm going to start with you. You know, obviously, we did the survey in the fall, and inflation was on every consumer's mind. And many, when they talk about inflation, they kind of maybe think about frozen or canned as cheaper and less food waste. What are some of the programs and ways you can communicate with your consumers on the value of fresh?
Yeah, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here, Rick, today. So it's a great program, and to be part of it, thank you for the opportunity. And value is a challenge in itself, right? Everyone up here defines value differently. It could be around variety of packaging, to size, to retail, to the seasonality that's within there. So that becomes a challenge. But you know, we continue to be able to ways that we have found to be able to bring value is one, fresh and convenient is Hannaford's strategy. So it is core to our strategy, front and center. And first, our promotional strategy. We have not veered from our promotional strategy with these inflations that Anne-Marie was talking about. We've stayed true. We partner with our suppliers to find relevant, the right time to be able to continue to promote, to bring that value to our customer, to keep them within the department. Next is around meal inspiration, really trying to find a way to help that consumer with meal inspiration. And a lot of those could be feed a family on $15. And those recipes include fresh produce to be able to keep them within there. You know, we also talk about and we do that digitally as well as in store. We also can continue to invest in our loyalty program, right? We all have different loyalty programs, and how we're able to engage the consumer. Maybe consumers that are lapsed shopping within produce and giving them offers to be able to bring them back. So we continue to find ways to engage them, or meal ideas that bring value back to them as well through there. And then lastly, we also figured we really focused around the snacking segment as well. That's an area we think that, you know, if you think about snacking of produce, right? If you take an apple or a banana or, you know, any of those compared to a bag of chips or crackers, boy, that's a value. And how do you portray that to the families and the consumers as they're purchasing? So there are many different ways that I think we have to position. And a lot of it is the partnership with the suppliers and growers too, to be able to bring it right time, when's the right supply, that works for both of us.
Yeah, thank you. Rich, I'm going to switch over to you. I thought it was really interesting in the data that we saw that the southeastern side of the country outperformed the rest of the country in terms of volume. They weren't down nearly as much as the rest of the country. What are some of your thoughts on why the Southeast differs from, you know, you have stores across the country. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for the invitation, for sure. Before I start, I actually want to appreciate the presentation you just did. That was a lot of really good data, and it was a really good story. And I think any of you who work with data, you should appreciate that. That was really well woven together. Good job. And I really do. It was very well done. And I said that to Rick before too, but it really was. It was excellently well done. And really, in my quest to try and one-up you in that data, I think I did a lot of work, and I have reams of people working on this, and I couldn't really find a lot of things that were significantly different. I would say though that convenience is absolutely driving more trips. And I think convenience, when we talk about online, I think when we think about convenience in terms of availability and the customer shows up in the store and it's there, those things drive trust. And I think for us, so when we think about what's happening in the Southeast, absolutely mixed issues. For the sure shelf-stable, people moving to shelf-stable items, whether it's canned goods or whether it's frozen or whether it's potatoes, onions, and other items that last longer in your store or in your refrigerator. I think all those things certainly helped drive the demographics in the region for sure. So we saw that in your data. For us, I wouldn't say that there's anything dramatically different other than the demographics here are clearly different. I think you have different populations, whether it's immigration coming in, whether it's international immigration or whether it's from other states in the US. I think when you think about what that drives again in terms of economic, the economic indicators of each of those people who come in, the groups that come in, I think you have a subset of tourism that again picked up again in 2022. I think the challenge is going to be lapping all that growth as we get on in the future. And I think the consumer, as we'll talk about, is clearly hurt or struggling. And I think for us, it's really how do we continue to drive consumption? And a lot of that, again, we're seeing it in terms of convenience and trust.
Great. Jeff, I'm looking at some of the anomalies in the report, and it was kind of interesting seeing some of the commodities like berries and cucumbers and some of the other ones that were outperforming. What are some of the ways you're capitalizing on the popularity of these categories? And is there a way to create even more success by introducing people to new items?
Yes, to answer your question, yes, for sure. And again, I want to thank too, again, third person, right? So yes, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. I love this report. After this, I download it. I actually use it in presentations throughout the company for produce managers, things like that. Sorry, usually I talk very loud. I apologize. So anyways, yeah, speaking of those items, the one thing I would say, there's stories. There's always stories about why things are up and why things are down. And you're looking at the berry category. It's been up for, I don't know, I think most of it's 5, 6, 8 years now. It just continues to climb. And it doesn't seem to matter anything that we do. We can't stop it. We've tried. I mean, Mother Nature has tried to kick us pretty good. And we always come back and we sell more berries, not just pounds, or not just sales, but units as well. Then the other items, grapes, again, anybody who, lived in the cherry world last year realizes how challenging that was and trying to get supplies. And I think that directly reflected in a lot of the grape sales. Not to take away from what we're doing in the grapes. You look back 10 years, what grapes were and what they are today, I think they eat much, much better. And I think that the varieties that are out there are fabulous. They're just getting better. And we think that's great. But those in the cucumbers, I cool as a cucumber. I don't know, was it hot last year? People were using I don't know, but I know there are a lot of varieties, and those varieties we continue to, and I apologize, I hate cutting out. Yeah, I love mics.
Yeah.
I love mics. Just give me one. Yeah, I can do a performance after this.
I want to see you dance.
Yeah.
Sing.
I'm going to hold off from dancing. But anyways, so cucumbers, they're great. There's a lot of new varieties and things like that. But we do take the time, obviously because these things are great, right? We open up allocations at store level. We try to communicate it, online. We try to communicate it at POS, at the point of sale. We do all those things, and we really try to beat the drum to say, hey, these things are great. They're different. It's something different. And that just continues to help increase consumption on those type of items. And cross-merchandising, I love doing that too. That's another thing. Get it out of the department. Move it even inside your department to different areas to like put cucumbers right by the salad case. Boom.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. And now that you have the mic, we'll put on some karaoke when we're done. Okay?
All right.
Anne-Marie?
Duck dance to go along with that. Also, marketplace reactions. Well, you would pretty much have to live under a rock not to be aware of inflation, and that's what we're seeing every single month. Just tons of people who are aware of inflation and concerned about it. But as I mentioned earlier, top of the list, when people talk about inflation, it is always eggs, produce, and meat. If you looked at the numbers with me just now, fresh produce actually isn't one of the ones that is driving the cost up. But as you can see, a lot of people still believe that fresh produce had higher inflation and they're more concerned about it. Concern is really across the board. Of course, there's that very small, high-end, high-income segment that is not too concerned about it because of their level of discretionary income, but the concern just absolutely rises as income gets lower. So it's anything from just being able to match the budgets at the end of the month, but also just being able to balance time and convenience and health and all those things that started to matter when times were good. So if we look at the fresh produce purchase decision, we give them a list of probably 15 different things. And what during good economic times floats to the top is appearance. We wanted to make sure it looks good. The ripeness is what we want. But what we saw last year, and it continued this year, is that price has become the most important thing into the purchase decision, though I will say it is hand in hand with appearance and ripeness. So it's really not just about price, it is about that total value, and I think that's a really important message for our industry to get out there. But in all, 84% of consumers have implemented money-saving measures as it relates to fresh produce, and that's actually a little bit higher than we see in the total store. So that probably goes hand in hand with that idea that consumers have in their head that fresh produce is more expensive. We're seeing all sorts of measures that are driving down that volume, that pressure that we saw earlier, which is anything from buying less to moving dollars to frozen and canned. But really, that sales promotion has become even more important. And as we saw last year and in 2020, we've not been able to deliver on sales promotions as much as we've been able to in years past. So a lot of retailers are working on anything from educating people about ripeness, all sorts of interesting promotions, whether that's member discounts, one-day sales, three-day sales. But we really have an opportunity to make produce shine as a budget hero as well. At the end of the day, if you look at the price per pound of most produce versus that of meat and seafood, we have an opportunity for a veggie lasagna, or as Allegiant did here in this video I'll play here in a minute. They won an award at the NGA show this week for a program that's $9 a day, where they give people tips on how to really save money on their total grocery bill. Here it goes.
Looking for ways to stretch your food budget? Here's a hack I like to use when I cook ground beef. Today, we're turning 1 pound of ground beef into 2. From this into this. Simply grab a few mushrooms, chop them up finely, and saute them. Put the cooked mushrooms aside and cook the ground beef. Then, add the finely chopped mushrooms back into the beef. This will taste just as delicious. Actually, twice as delicious. Do you have any food hacks you'd like to share? Let us know with hashtag #FoodTownFoodHacks, and we'll feature your creative ways to make your money go further and your food taste delicious.
So we're going to look at a whole host of other things people are doing to really drive home that idea of freshness. It's going to last in your refrigerator. But yes, specials have taken on a very important role as people shop for groceries. The whole idea of looking at what is on sale across different stores is back, especially looking at what's on sale at your main store. We see people, once they're in the produce department, actually spending more time comparing things that are on sale or what is the best deal, adjusting what they're making for dinner, and also even looking at some brand options as well, where we're continuing to see private brands making inroads into our produce department. So where are they looking? That's really changing as well. If we looked 15 years ago, it was all about the paper circular. A lot of retailers are pulling back on the paper circular because of the lack of distribution with local little towns, but also, of course, the cost of paper and the ability to now do so much more digitally. So we see a lot of focus on that in-store signage, which of course means we have an opportunity there to immediately connect with consumers, but we also have to make sure we don't take away from the visual beauty of our produce department by having a ton of different signs up there as well. We did see a slight uptick in promoted sales for total fruit and veg over the last year, but if we compare that 36% for fruit to the 48% that it was in 2019, we still have a long way to go in promoting as much as we did, if that is the road that we want to go. But certainly consumers are looking for it, and creativity in promotions is really what we need to do in order to bring them those things that they're looking for. Personalized promotions become more popular by the day. If we talk to retailers and look at their numbers, the open rates on personalized promotions are incredible. In a typical promotion is 1 to 2% open rates. Personalized 13, 14, 15% is what we're seeing. And interestingly, there used to be a very big gap between the generations where boomers were not so sure to have everything customized to their needs. But now you see that gap really closing, where younger generations still like the idea of personalized, but there's really not much of a gap left. So if we look at some of the tactics that are being applied across the world, that's exactly what we're seeing. Here you see a European retailer that has that QR code in their produce department for personalized discounts. You see Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, my country, using what they call a dynamic pricing, where depending on how far out the due date of the produce is, there is a different price to try and move stuff faster that way. We see a lot of retailers freeze prices, bring prices back to 2019, really getting in front of folks. That begs the question. We know, especially on the fruit side of things, impulse has been our bread and butter for a lot of our sales. So is there still opportunity for impulse? Well, yes, there is. People really love seasons. We used to see that seasons, eye-catching display, and locally grown were all within a percentage point from one another. Seasonal items have really taken that leap ahead, so that is an important clue for us. Eye-catching displays still tend to be really, really important, and that's a big message for the retailers in the room. Talk to your labor. You're not just doing this because I tell you to do it. You're really doing this because eye-catching displays get people to buy something that they were not planning on buying. The other are, of course, recipe ideas. That's a big one. Have your on-package signage, all these different things. Sampling, that's the one thing the internet cannot do. And then, of course, new items. So, Rick, over to you.
So we're kind of talking about the marketplace reactions, and I'm a firm believer that the glass is still half full. We look at the numbers versus 2019, they're up, but you know how it is. You're dealing with your CFOs, and they're like, that was yesterday, we're talking about today, right? So, Mike, one of the things that did concern me was this idea that consumers are sticking to their list. And when I think of a beautiful produce department, the sales are always built off of those impulse sales. So how are you addressing that, and how can you override that mentality of, I'm going to stick to the list?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and to your point, we consume with our eyes first. So, right, the beautifully looking merchandise departments, how we cross-merchandise, how we bring that to life really is the first showstopper of coming in, and digitally. How we bring that to life online as people are sitting home. So I think that's a key that we have to take away. The other is engaging them prior to their shop. We know that consumers are sitting at home planning prior to coming in, right? Really to try to stick to there. So how do we leverage digital? How do we help them in their planning to be able to bring that impulse into life? The cross-merchandising that you was talked about earlier is key. All of us, right? Produce and meat and everybody fights for space within the store, right? We're all fighting and trying to do that. But as much as it is getting some cross-merchandising, maybe, the limes over with beer or seasonal fruit, veg with the meat department, but it's also creating those points of interruption for that consumer of simple meal ideas. As you walk in, it could be bringing sausage over with a nice pepper display in our department that really stops and has that. So I think it's key as we create those points of interruption and stuff. It's leveraging the social media that would just show what a great way to really inspire people with different ideas. That is key that we have to do, and we have to get better at it. I mean, it will, as we know, social media is playing a much larger influence into how people are shopping or how people are looking. We also try to give different ideas as well. So again, in that prepping or even in store, I may look at berries and think, you know what, I use them for my breakfast. That's what I use berries for, and that's my routine. But how do you inspire them to look at it for maybe mocktails or cooking it with recipes? And so that's key in continuing to add to that list or impulse. And lastly, it's really working with the suppliers and growers here, because when there are flushes that come on, and we use them at Hannaford called sales building opportunities, really, and really partnering together, and as we talked about with food waste and how do we not have more food waste, is really being quickly reacting and bringing that in and at a value, putting in front of the consumer, and really, surprise and delighting them. So those are some of the key things that we see that's continued successful to build baskets.
Great points, especially the digital points. I think you're spot on with that. Jeff, one of the things, the top saving measure that consumers said, I'm looking for items on promotion. And obviously, if you had everything on promotion, your margins would sink. So what are you doing in a creative way to kind of get that customer to buy more promotionally?
Yeah, so we're fortunate enough at Tops to be a high-low retailer, so that's great. So we are highly promotional, and again, some of the as we've seen some of these numbers, some of the strategies that we've done before, we think, okay, how can we build on that? And one that comes to mind that we've had some pretty good success with is the buy one get one free. Okay, what's that mean? Oh, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to get that. And back in the day, if you rewind it 5 years ago, buy a potato, get an onion, or buy 2 potatoes. Maybe you don't need them. So now we're running like department-wide BOGOs. So where if you want to get an apple, you want to get a potato, you want to get this, you want to get that, a salad, we've done that. And I think that's really kind of spurred on some additional excitement at the store level. I do store level and with the consumers. And then also we still are able, amazingly, to do 10 for 10 ads, which are phenomenal. And then we tie them to something called gas, which, wow, we all know what that's done, right? So we tie it to a gas promotion, and boom, all those things, we could see 30 to 40% increases on items just tying it at that same retail with the gas promotion. So, again, we're very fortunate to have that strategy and being able to have fun like that. But those are some of my favorites. It all has to happen at stores, though. It's all about how do you make it happen and how do you speak, at store level, and how do you hit to the consumers? Because as all the data said, right, the circular is not getting, used as much and all those stuff. But we support these promotions through all of those avenues, deploying digital assets and things like that. So,
thanks. So, Rich, we had a high-low operator just talk, and I think of Walmart's tagline, save money, live better, is focused on an everyday low price strategy. Do you believe that has influenced shoppers' channel selection during these inflationary concerns?
Yes, I mean, it shows in the data. And you can see we released earnings last week, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And part of what we talked about was just the middle to high income, and as well as what we would call the aspirational customer too. So we've seen a lot of traffic drive into our model. And EDLP, or Save Money, Live Better, is really a philosophy of the entire company. It's not something that we think about just in terms of how we buy. And a lot of that is driven by a model that we use called EDLP, which is everyday low prices. And if you, Jeff, as you were talking about it, and it works. I mean, we think about globally, and there's markets like Mexico that have a very similar format where we run a lot of high-low promotions. And in those type of markets, and Chile and other markets around the world where we see different models of how to attract the customer, we're actually going to an EDLP model more on a global scale, which is extremely challenging if you know anything about the formal and informal markets outside of the U.S. So for us, I think the EDLP model, we think it clearly works. It's part of our DNA. It's something that we're definitely going to stick with. We don't have some of the flexibility to run the same promotion. So while store managers have the opportunity to compete on price or milk or some of these other items, dairy specifically, they can go around and see how they are in the market and make adjustments to their pricing for that. Generally speaking, we use a lot of data to drive some of these decisions, and because of the demographics globally or within the U.S. and how different they are, we have to use that format, and because we don't typically have store or produce people within our stores. So for us, what we do see, one is price elasticity clearly works. I would guess that those cucumbers probably happened at some point or another when we talked about cucumber growth. There was probably some places where we ran different numbers or other people ran promotions on them for a lot of reasons. So clearly we're seeing elasticity as part of the model. But for us, it's really, again, about convenience and trust. We want the customer to know that when they come to Walmart, they will get the lowest price. It's consistent. Now, we do gap analysis like everyone else. We try and figure out and make sure where we are with the competition. But we do try and run the same play every day. And I think for us, the challenge is to create some of the impulse energy. And we're doing that digitally. And I think when we think about digital for us, it's fresh is our fastest growing segment. So as we've had extremely strong growth over the last 2 years on a 2-year stack, we're somewhere around 23-24%. So I think when we think about our model in that area, we believe that EDLP, or Save Money, Live Better, is our philosophy. It's driven by EDLP, which again is driven by another part of it, what we call EDLC, which is the everyday low cost. But it's a philosophy that we buy into. It's something that Sam Walton brought to the party 60 years ago, and it's something that we're going to stick with because we see it working.
You know, one quick question, any one of you can jump in on this. You know, our data still shows that consumers are eating more meals at home. And so I see a lot of retailers going into this meal planning, promotional kind of mentality, how to help come up with that solution for the meal for the consumer. Now, the first thing everyone thinks about is cross-merchandising, but that has operational challenges. You know, you want your customers to be able to navigate through the department. Are any of you addressing produce in the meal planning scheme in your organizations? Any one of you can jump in on this.
Yeah, we definitely do. Yeah, every week we have some sort of a meal plan, and fortunately in our DNA it has been cross-merchandising is something we do pretty well. And we're able to make sure produce is a huge part of that, right? Yeah, sure, meat's the center of the plate. That's all right. You got to move that out of the way. You got to double up on the veg, right? Everybody knows it. So, and then you make sure you throw some fruit in there too. But yeah, we definitely do it. I think it's a successful thing. I think it's just about you got to continue to repeat and hit it every week, which is what we do. And it's not just a meal solution, it's meals solution specifically because of the challenges everybody's facing today. I think you've got to give them different options, you know, throughout the course of their shopping experience.
Yeah, I would add as well, I think it's going back to that preparing at home, right? They're really looking for there, and everybody was looking for that fast and convenience. And sometimes it's not that, right? It's giving that inspiration of how do I use potatoes differently than I do today? And we use that digitally as well as in our weekly flyer, giving suggestions and ideas for that planning. And I think it's important through there because sometimes it's intimidating, right? Everyone became an at-home chef. How do we leverage the TikToks? How do we leverage the other social medias really to help plan there? And that's where we've really started to engage. It's almost prior than getting into the store because we know we have about 5 seconds of their attention as they're navigating through. So I think it's almost outside of more that meal planning for us than as much as it is in store.
Sure. And I definitely think technology has a big play there, where the use of QR codes and the way younger shoppers are shopping, I think there's a lot of opportunity to plant the seed that way as well. Anne-Marie, you want to go into the next section?
Yeah, so let's talk consumption here, because despite all the efforts of many of you in the room, we continue to see that per capita produce consumption not really going in the direction that we would like. So what we did see in the survey this year is that there's some silly people, about 3%, that say they never eat fresh fruit and veggies. But then if you look at the number that just does 1 day a week, or less than 1 day a week, or 1 to 3 days a week, those are some significant numbers. And really the charge behind this entire chart is how do we move people further to the right? At the end of the day, there's about 34% who say they eat fresh produce every single day. So that is a third of Americans. So there is a really, really big goal for us to continue to strive for that. In terms of where people are implementing fresh fruit and veg, what you're seeing is that on the vegetable side, of course, it continues to be really that dinner and lunch occasion. Fruit does much better across the different areas. Not quite sure who is eating vegetables for dessert that often, but maybe they eat pumpkin pie every day, I don't know. But anyways, if you look at these numbers, I would say that we have opportunity to implement greater penetration of fresh fruit and veg across all these different consumption occasions. And the consumers are providing us a couple of clues. First of all, better knowledge can really boost engagement. 48% said, you know, health and wellness, as I juggle money, as I juggle time, health is still important. And it would really be wonderful to know, much like Center Store and Frozen do really, really well, what kind of health benefits come along with what kind of fruit and vegetable. An easy way to eat more, I think that really goes to the meal planning that some of you guys have talked about, the snacking. How can you really make it easy so people don't need to think about the first part, the planning and the shopping, and really only have to eat what is in their refrigerator. Then 39% are saying, well, you know what, I'm really not quite sure what one serving of fresh fruit and veg is. Well, that should be easy to fix. And what we're seeing internationally is a whole lot more focus on the translation between how many servings is one apple. Is that one or is that two? So that might be a way to just really, if you don't know where the bar is, it's hard to fall below or exceed that bar. So we see more and more education coming into the departments, whether that's signage or unpacked labels, just helping people digitally in store. And here's a wonderful TikTok provided by our panel. I think something you said was really, really important. Yes, in store we have about 3 to 5 seconds to capture people's attention, but yet we spend 2.5 hours a day on these kinds of platforms. So it is really important for us to communicate on those kinds of things. The other opportunity, and this is a fun finding that we had in the fall with the SEPC research and continued on that, was the idea of when we lose the meal to food service, do we lose it altogether or do we still have an opportunity to win? Well, it turns out we still have an opportunity to win. When people order from restaurants, what we're seeing is they're pulling back on things like desserts, appetizers, and sides. So, and of course, a lot of people are doing takeout and delivery as well to save on that whole meal in restaurant meal occasion. So what we're seeing is that the vast majority of Americans at some point during the month do either takeout or delivery. Then it turns out there's a lot of people that add fresh produce to that restaurant delivery. 24% do so frequently, 37% do so occasionally. So can that be a formula? Can we go after that dollar to really say, hey, you know what, when you order a pizza, add a bagged salad to that, or add some fruit for the kids when you order a burger from a restaurant. So that might be a way, when we've lost a meal occasion, to still win with fresh produce. So what do people do when they do these things? Well, the top one is actually fresh fruit. In talking to consumers, that is very much that kid edition. So in other words, we drove through McDonald's drive-thru, we got the double cheeseburger meal, but we add some fruit from our home fruit dish. A vegetable other than salad, adding maybe even some more topics on the pizza, which is less expensive than doing it, ordering from the restaurant. So lots and lots of opportunity here. And I'm going to kick it over to you. This is show and tell, Rick, for the questions.
Okay. Jeff, I think I'm going to start with you. I just find it amazing over the last 2 years how consumers are changing their habits. And this idea of ordering from a restaurant, bringing it home and combining it with foods at home, and then we're hearing this is an opportunity. How do you capture that type of sale? You know, how could we communicate this to the consumer in advance?
Yeah, so in advance, I know we really focus big on the point of sale. You know, whether it's in our carry-out department, our prepared foods department, whether it's in our salad case, communicating it back. You know, we try to go back and forth and just continue to try to communicate the message to the consumer. And again, it's a challenge, but it's one that, you know, I think we just continue to fight the good fight there, and we'll end up winning. But yeah, it's an opportunity. I know, like we were talking, and we were talking about, you know, how like if you go to a certain restaurant and they'll throw like a peeled apple in the bag. And so, right, so in our carryouts, I mean, we sell similar things, and why can't we just have that there? it's a challenge, right? Because it's produce and carryout managers and department leads are different. So now you've got to break down the silo, but it's something that, we continue to strive to do, and I think that's part of the solution. Probably not the entire one, but it's part of it.
Rich, one of the benefits of being on this panel is we have a lot of packer shipper growers out in the audience. And so this is always an opportunity for a panelist to kind of put the rock in their pocket. So what would you like to see from the growers in terms of lunch and dinner snack innovation for both fruits and vegetables?
So actually, first I want to go back to what you said, Jeff, in terms of like driving the events. I think for us, online pickup delivery is a huge channel for us, and we're doing a lot of exactly what you said. I think there's an opportunity for us to work with growers and shippers along those lines to figure out ways to, at some point when the customer comes in and they're waiting for their order, we have a great experience, we might drop a mandarin or an apple or something inside of the bag or a little snack kit. And I think so there is a way to drive consumption via some of those channels that we're talking about, that even though it's not in store and sampling, it's a really good opportunity for us to connect directly with the customer. Obviously, it's about customer experience for us too, so the customer feels excited and happy that they get a mandarin or something free to try. Their kids are in the car. So there's a lot of personalization, a lot of opportunity for us to touch the customer in that process. And I think that's one way we're trying to drive both consumption and awareness. And it's a great opportunity for you as grower shippers to figure out how to get your new products out with us. I would say in terms of overall innovation, and we have 4,700 stores or so in the U.S., and I think we don't have to do that. We don't have to do something in every one of those stores. So for us, it's about, we have a lot of different segments, a lot of parts of the U.S. where we have this opportunity to really think about how do we target something? How do we do a small snacking tomato in a certain region? So for us, come to us with your good ideas. We want to try them, and we want to see how we can get the consumer to adopt them. I think you all, the lens that you need to put on though is to think about, again, thinking about save money, live better, is how does your product, when you bring it to us, how does it save money for the consumer, and how is it going to help them live better? And so for all of us, I think, as we think about that philosophy, we want your new items. We can test them and target them. We can provide data and feedback about how they're performing. But we have to think about it in terms of the customer. Ultimately, the customer will decide what we sell. And so for us, I think, as growers, coming out and thinking about how do you optimize the productivity in the field, because I know that yield is the number one cause. I see Brian Handel over there. Brian, I know yield is it, right, bud? And so when we think about that, we have to drive yield in the field, but we have to also think about the consumer experience in terms of flavor and shelf life. So for us, I think if I was talking about it, we don't do a great job on regional brands, but we want to try it. We want to do better. I think focus on the customer is probably my last lesson. And finally, I would pivot to surety of supply, because for me, that's my favorite. That's what I live every day, is what we call surety of supply, which is really about today's supply, tomorrow's supply, and through the crop cycle and then long term. But it's about the supply pipeline for us. And for us, surety of supply means that it's in the store when the customer wants to get it. And again, if we pivot on price and convenience, or convenience and trust, which is where we are, the customer has to trust that when they take the time to come to our store or go on the app, that it will be available. So for us, it's about that consistency and trust, and that's about consistent supply. And so for us, it's really about how do you, and all of us, I'm sure on the panel, are going to say, please communicate to us early and often and transparently. That we can make adjustments, all of us can make adjustments in our supply chain. It's not easy sometimes, but having the information, and my team specifically tries to go to the field level, because I think sometimes the filters happen. I certainly feel filters in my world. And so if we're dealing with people who are not connected to the business, maybe it's a salesperson who doesn't quite understand or doesn't want to hurt our feelings, we try and get to the field level, because that's where some of the real information is. But we wouldn't mind talking to anyone that's going to give us accurate, transparent information. So ultimately, that's what we're looking for. Think about customer, think about communication.
When I think of consumption, Mike, I think consumers consistently tell us they're looking for more nutritional information. Can you tell us about Hannaford's Guiding Stars program and how you showcase nutritional food choices?
Yeah, I brought pictures to help. That was.
Did you?
But Guiding Stars really, and we heard earlier today, is really ADUSA uses Guiding Stars, and it's really an at-a-glance nutrition program, and it's foundational in our efforts to help shoppers find the most nutritious foods quickly and easily. I can tell a story of being in a store when I was in operations and, you know, a mother telling to a child, you know, here's a cereal aisle with 400 choices going down through there and saying, you can find a product with a star. And that made it very easy for that mother and the child to be able to do that. So it's really helping them through there, especially at a time when there's such conflicting nutrition and health out there. Guiding Stars is a science fact-based to make it easier for shoppers to have good, better, or best. And so it really helps with the nutritional choices that are there. There's a wide array for all of us to really be able to help us at our disposal for if it's about personal balance like sleep, anxiety, nutrition. And Guiding Stars is really part of a holistic health approach to be able to help in part of that. So how does it work? And I'm not going to get into the science, and there's a nice long algorithm, but what I would say is this was formulated over 15 years ago. So in 2020, it had a 15-year anniversary. So it has stood the test of time. And we continue to partner with health and independent scientific experts to be able to help us continue to evaluate, right? Things are changing all the time, and so it stood the test of time because we continue to update the algorithm, we continue to update it with the science information that's coming in. And so we bring it to life, as you can see, within the store many different ways, both digitally as well as easy within the store. On our tags, signage, as customers can go around and very easily be able to say, oh, look for the Guiding Stars. And for produce, of course, it's quite easy because we are almost everything that we carry, you know, has that guiding star. But as you think about going beyond that, and also what I would say is it's what our dietitians. We have world-class dietitians working for us, and they use that as a foundation to really be able to help coach customers online, in store, to really be able to make healthy choices as they're going around through the store. So we're really proud that, you know, in ADUSA we continue to leverage this, and we offer that to our customers as a simple, at-a-glance process.
That's great. That's great. Anne-Marie?
All right, so meal planning, that's where, of course, a lot of changes are happening too. We've talked about digital several times. If we went to one of the first years of the Power of Produce, what we saw was routine meals were like 70-something% of all the meals. Well, routine is down, whether I talk to a meat audience, a produce audience. There is a lot of influence still from friends and family. Of course, some of that comes through the Facebooks and other social platforms that we are on. But more than anything, if you look at the areas that are growing, they are all the digital areas. So it's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's TikTok that has become the biggest one among the younger shoppers, as we'll see here in a sec. And it's really become a lot about video as well, as we see here, where you go to Fresh Market and you see nothing but videos, inspiration that then becomes instantly shoppable as well. That's really a prime way in which we can start to connect inspiration to purchase as well. So here you see those top 5 resources by generation, and just even look at the difference between Gen Z and millennials. So if you look at Gen Z, TikTok is the number one, and number one by a mile. Then you look at millennials, and YouTube is the number one. You look at Gen X and boomers that have similar items in the top 5, but they are mixed around a little bit differently. What does that mean? Well, ultimately in our stores, we have all 5 generations running around, so we need to really fire on all cylinders in order to connect with people. But ultimately, TikTok has become extremely powerful. If you think about the fact that TikTok videos also feed into Pinterest, feed into YouTube, etc. So these are really important things, and we have more show and tell right here.
Yeah, there you go, dude.
This was a very popular TikTok, coconut water with all the fresh berries, where Tops is showing all the ingredients. Do you know how the engagement was? Or?
Yeah, no, I think it was great. Yeah, we get more and more. Yeah, it's just fun. It's a fun thing to watch, and yeah, it's great. Very good engagement.
Yeah. So here we see the recipe being made, and as you can see, just a quick video involving tons and tons of different fruit items. Coconut water over the top, and that was one of the big trends that we saw last year. In terms of how people want to see recipes, well, that is moving very quickly from reading to watching. As you can see, people that prefer written overall is 41%, but that is heavily, heavily driven by Gen X and Boomer generations. If you look at video, you see that 50% of Gen Z want to see things in video. Now, what we do see that as people start to cook more over time, they're like, you know what, I don't need to see how to cut a tomato each and every time. So there is a lot of demand for video, but also for the ability to maybe skip a few steps ahead as people become more knowledgeable in their cooking practices. There we go. Value added overall is continuing to become more and more popular. What we see is the number of people that never buy value added continues to come down every single year we do this question, and the number of people that buy them very frequently or occasionally continues to go up. And indeed, when we overlay that with the IRI numbers, value added had a big year. 2020 was a very odd year where value added vegetables did really, really well as we were all cooking at home, but fruit, which is much more related to on the go and entertaining as well, did not have a good year in 2020. 21, 22, all that has been reversed as we're going back out on the road, as all the evening activities have geared back up, kids are back in school. So value-added fruit, as you can see here, had a really big 2022. And you see, indeed, some great volume growth on the value-added fruit side as well. And as we're looking for pockets of growth, this is definitely one. But at the same time, value-added veg might be something where people are looking to save a little bit of money and doing a little bit of more work themselves. In terms of what are the top ones selling on the fruit side, as you can see, a lot of that has to do with that entertaining platter that you can just see if you look at the numbers, but also those pre-cut sliced apples that you often see in kid meals on the food service side. So those are great items if you think about that takeout or delivery meal from restaurants. What are some of the items to add to that? And of course, on the veg side, we see massive, massive strength continuing in the bagged salad, the cut carrots, the baby carrots, but also sliced mushrooms and those kinds of things where people look to save a little bit of time. Convenience continues to be a massive driver, and that's just really what the complexity of this market is. There's a lot of people who say, you know what, I need to save on money, but at the same time, convenience is still really, really big as we just balance our lives through the lens of budget, through the lens of time and everything else. So there continues to be interest in greater assortment of value-added fruit and vegetables. Meal kits, this one surprised me a little bit. A lot of retailers tell me that meal kits are not doing as well as we were hoping to. And still a lot of interest in things like spiralized or riced veggies, as well as blended items. 40%, 50% of people are saying that they are looking for stretching that meat dollar, much like we saw in that Allegiance video earlier on. So this is really where fruit and veg can be that budget hero, in addition to, as the dietitian said, making things twice as delicious as well. So Rick, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with you, Rich. We talked, and you mentioned it earlier, the role of convenience. And I was saying how one of the conveniences is how retailers help consumers solve for the meal solution. How is Walmart using technology to help achieve that?
So the first question is, for the first thing I think I'll take is the audience engagement. So who knows where the nearest Walmart store is? Somebody does. Where is it?
I can't explain it, but it's over by Chewy's.
Okay, close. Anyone else have an idea where your nearest Walmart store is, except for Mike, who was there last week? Mike, go ahead, say something. Right here. It's in your, that's right, it's in your pocket, right? Your nearest Walmart store is on the Walmart app. And that, to us, is what we're really driving through, right? Is how do we drive convenience? So you can build your shopping list. You could buy, you could order, you could have it delivered, you could have it picked up, you could set your time to go pick it up, or you could just build your list so you walk in your store and you go and it drives you around the store versus some of the we're implementing. So for us, I think, how do we use technology? It's really about getting people into our ecosystem And it's about getting people into the ecosystem. Obviously, everyone in this room at one point or another has bought paper towels or toilet paper for their house. So at some point, using the general merchandise and the consumables part of our business to help drive people into the other fresh channels for us. So for us, it's really about driving the convenience and through technology is about getting them into our ecosystem for our app. And then from there, we have information, right? They're a more engaged customer once we have people who are inside of our app and inside our ecosystem. From there, we can start building out. You know, we've got one-click meal solutions. We've got things like that within our app. But we're also thinking about how do we join the customer earlier in the journey? So when the customer's out doing fitness or buying fitness clothes or buying weights, how do we then think about, do we suggest broccoli and a salad or some other things like that? So using algorithms that we're generating through through their presence within our app and through online, those things will help us drive a meal solution for the consumer. You know, we think about, you know, in general, people have, I think the number is 10 to 12 meals that they pick every week, right? Or through the course of if you all think about what you buy or what you eat, it's probably about 8 to 10 different things, right? And so for us, it's about how do we then engage within those experiences to say, here's something new to try. So a lot of this, again, is around getting the customer earlier inside of their journey within the app, thinking about the ecosystem, and then thinking about how do we use kind of the current offering, or how do we use our opportunity, how do we drive them to different parts of the menu to help make their lives easier and ultimately save time.
Great answer, great answer. Yeah, Jeff, I'm just amazed at how fickle the consumer is. You know, they tell us inflation, they're trying to save price, yet we saw value added really contributed. And we all know value added is a little bit more expensive. How do you go about communicating around the value of convenience?
So I guess, again, I go back to the point of sale. That's what I usually go, point of sale. This is only this much per pound, that type of thing. You can do it right there. But, you know, value means different things to different people. And Mike, you said it. And so this is something that you buy. You're getting what you pay for when you're looking at something that's already done. You know there's no guesswork. You're not going to take home a cantaloupe and cut it in the rinds, you know, whatever, 3/4 inch green. You're going to get what you pay for. You're going to see it. I think that's a value. And I think really that's where some of that is coming from. Yes, back to work and all those things, and those occasions have obviously went up. But I really think that's a big part of it. And we continue just to try to, you know, get it out in front of the consumer, let them know that it is. It's not that much. It's not that much per serving. And again, that was something else, right? What is a serving? Which blows my mind that people don't know. But that's fine. You know, so again, a lot of things about consumers blow my mind. But yeah.
You know, Mike, we saw Gen Z uses TikTok and YouTube as their top meal inspiration resource. I know Hannaford has some great recipe content on their TikTok. How do you use TikTok, continuing to play a role in the shopper's meal planning? And any other social media successes?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, TikTok's one for learning from myself, right, as we think about it. But yeah, TikTok, the social media is definitely something that we're focused on in Hannaford. And actually for TikTok, we just went on in 2022 was our first video. And you saw our video that we put up there that Anne-Marie played. And so it's relatively new, and we continue to engage that platform, but we're also ensuring that we find what's the right content to engage our consumers with, because just like many other social media, if you go on, there can be way too much content, and it actually turns me off. So it's really being able to find that content that matters, right? And not only is it a great meal inspiration, but it's also becoming the preferred search engine, especially for Gen Zers, right? They're using this as a search engine in these platforms. And so, you know, it's creating a cultural shift of how we engage. You know, we're really looking for consumers to read about something that's not their first choice is to read about something. It's to watch a 30-second video and learn. We're all DIYs at home, and now we think we can remodel our store remodel our houses because of all the videos. You know, our social team, continues to focus on meal planning, but it's also a focus around educational opportunities that fit naturally for our brand, but at home in the kitchen, right? How to be able to cook, how to be able to prep. So really trying to look for those ways that bring education that are useful. As I was talking about, individuals may be able to skip over certain steps because they learn, but that's just the way we're finding it. We're finding, partnering with trends on social media quickly to be able to jump on. In days of old, if all of a sudden there was a trend, by the time we got signs printed and got them to the store, and we're 6-8 weeks later. And now we're able to quickly be able to jump on with lo-fi videos to be able to capture those in the moment and be able to bring it to life. And so, you saw one of the videos around citrus and how we do that seasonally, right? Important as we think about produce and the seasonal aspects of it, right? It's jumping on trends. We did one around zucchini and how to be able to create the zucchini and stuff. And that was jumping on a TikTok from a master chef. So there are just different ways I think we have to be continuing to engage and find the right ways and not overpower these social media platforms. So.
I know you shared the zucchini one, and I immediately forwarded it to my daughter. I'm going to take 1 minute here. I just want to see, I'd like the baby boomers to just stand up for a second. Let's see how many baby boomers we got in the crowd. Stand up. Okay? All right, go ahead and sit down. How about Gen X? It's all self-identification. I'm going to stand up when I say Gen Z. Here's Gen X.
Gotta stand up, fellas.
Here's Gen X.
Gotta represent.
Okay? How about millennial? How many are going to represent millennial?
Yeah, there we go.
Pretty big group. All right, Gen Zers. Let's see you.
There we go.
Yeah. We love you, Gen Z. Trust me.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Go ahead, Ann.
Well, as we saw all the different generations, one of the other things that the younger generations are really driving is that importance of environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and that is going to be our last section, because if we look at food waste, which we know is an issue that people do associate with fresh produce, we see that it is not just an environmental issue, not just a social issue, but the emphasis this year of it is really on the idea that I cannot financially afford the food waste. So the cost, whether I look at meat or produce or dairy, it's really that financial picture that has added to the traditional platforms of waste relative to the environment. As well. So what we're seeing in areas across the world is really a big focus on the recognition that people are of different household sizes, one person in the household all the way to 5 or 6. So here you see a retailer in the Netherlands having a different number of package quantities available. One small little one that is about 1 cup for people that might be a one-person household, or if a certain person likes it, but not the rest of the household, and makes up for it in the price per pound there as well in different ways. We see a lot of focus on freshness, making sure that when you buy it from our store, it is going to last at your home. So here you see different items, such as when you do your afternoon walk to pull out everything that might not be looking good, have that little sign on there that says the last freshness walk happened at 3:25 p.m., giving people that idea of, wow, it is as fresh as it can be, which is something you do anyway. You see the half of the Belgian endive behind the lid because the darkness keeps it fresh longer. You see UK pulling off the best before date of apples with the specific reason to prevent food waste. Joe Watson provided this picture of a store really explaining how they do their sourcing and why that helps you as a consumer, saying we make sure that we have very quick turns, we don't have a lot of inventory sitting here, so when you buy it, it is as fresh as it can be. So really that freshness promise is becoming more and more important. What are some of the underlying causes at home? Well, certainly we see the fruit and veg side, people saying, I just can't eat it fast enough. Sometimes plans go awry. We do takeout, we do a delivery, and it goes bad. So really freshness is a very important issue. And then as we move more to packaged produce here in the United States, we see that 48% of all households in the US are saying, well, it comes in quantities that are really too big for me to eat. So that's something to keep in mind. At the same time, absolutely, there is recognition for that functional part of packaging in produce for safety, for freshness, and everything else. And if you compare that to the numbers prior to the pandemic, you see that packaging functionality is recognized a whole lot more, up from 31 to 41%. So Packaging is not necessarily a negative, but figuring out how we communicate that idea of the need for packaging is a big one. Because if we just take 2020 out, that was an anomaly year, of course. If we look at all those areas, we see that the random weight has been coming down across all fruit and vegetables for years, starting in 2018, and it's really that package side of the business that has been driving a lot of the growth. And if we think about online shopping, if we think about self-checkout, and a lot of the formats where everything is packaged, that's where we're seeing just a lot of the growth. And the fixed weight share has increased an astounding from 53% in 2018 to 61%. So this growth of packaged is real. But the information really relative to all of this is very, very key, especially to millennials, Gen Z, those younger generations. What is the country that it's coming from? So here we had a scale that said, well, it doesn't really matter to me. Well, maybe it's a tiebreaker, or it's really a purchase priority. So knowing the country is incredibly important. Is there room for a little flag or something on there? How was it grown? And that's where we see a lot of the influence of social media, quick TikToks, just some really big influencers out there just showing how things are grown and what happens on the field. We have an opportunity to really communicate that story everywhere of where does it come from, what is your sourcing policies if you're a retailer, what is the story, put it on the pack, put it on social, put it in signage, and also the virtual visits. Look at the interest coming out of the consumer for virtually visiting a greenhouse or the field or anywhere. This is a really big opportunity. You know, in the years past, it had to be a beautifully produced video that cost a lot of money. It's not that way anymore. That is really another beauty of social media. Claims continue to have a very wide appeal. You see 60% interested in locally grown in the USA. And it's very different by generation. So more important for those younger generations are things like seasons, organic, and sustainably grown as well. So really hitting home on the right claims in the right store with the right audience continues to be a big opportunity. In social responsibility, we see continued growth across categories in things like not wasting, making sure lower income communities have access to fresh fruit and vegetables as well, and really knowing more about that produce has become bigger and bigger. In terms of organic, that tends to still be an area of growth. Now, it was a very, very big area of growth, double digits for years and years and years. It has slowed down a little bit where you see the dollars were up 2.6%, but it also had some volume pressure. It's typically very, very difficult for organic performance to take a different route than what is happening in the total department, so this is not surprising, but it is continuing to be an area where we see less volume pressure than the department overall. And certainly we see continued interest in that, but it is important to keep in mind that those who love organic believe they will love it more. So the growth really will come from that core consumer, and that's our conundrum, because that core consumer looks for more organic items across the board, where we're not getting a whole lot of new people to move into the organic category. So that is a puzzle that we need to figure out. Show and tell, and back over to you, Rick.
Okay. So clearly, environmental and social areas are really important to the consumers. Growing information has gotten even more important. Jeff, how do you provide information on, and how can the grower shippers help you provide that information?
Yeah, so again, all the regular channels that we've been talking about today, obviously in-store is a great one. You know, we showcase farmers' photos and some of the things they grow. We let them know where they live or where they're growing from, whether it's in Buffalo, New York, or whether it's in California, or whatever the case may be. We call those things out, but we also back it up digitally and on, you know, obviously, you know, and all the digital assets that we have. So it's just a constant, and it's a constant, you know, hit it, you know, it's on packaging. A lot of times it's on packaging. It's grown locally. You know, get a lot of that information. You know, there's so much so many things we have to hit. You got to be careful, right? So you don't want to give them information overload. Produce is the best thing about produce. The best looking part is the produce, and I've said that before. But yeah, growing information's great. Just the farmers love it. Boy, when you put them in an ad, I put them on in the newspaper with their picture when they walk in the store. It's just wow, a sense of pride, and I think it connects the consumer. Wow, oh okay, I know right where that's at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, Mike, I am fairly positive about produce, and I feel it is half full. But one of the things that really concerned me in the data was the consumers talking about they're concerned about food waste. You know, they've been eating and cooking at home, inflation's high, and they don't want to see what they just spent get thrown away. So how does your organization help them in terms of how much what to look for when they buy, how to store it, how to create a little bit more shelf life for the product they take home?
Yeah, great question, and I would go back to this morning again, recognize what a great session this morning around this topic and stuff, and I thought the panel did a phenomenal job doing that, so just to call out to them, and reducing food waste is critical to ADUSA and for Hannaford. I'm very proud that in 2020, we had 0 food waste go to any landfills, and so really working to be able to do that and have that go to community centers or going into other areas that go from landfills is very critical to us and something we're very proud of. Some of the pictures that you have here is critical, and what I would say, it starts back up even with the consumer, but through our supply chain. We heard this morning how critical it is to our supply chain and be efficient. It's critical also for us. We have a training program to really educate our associates on the handling. Right? If we can take out some of the handling that's happening at the store level and the education that they can provide onto the customers becomes a very powerful tool for us as well. And then there's different ideas that we'll bring digitally as well as through our flyers and other engagements such as, chef-approved Thanksgiving leftovers, right? We all have a ton of things that are left over. How do we do that? How might we can, right? Canning became, everybody wanted to can. Everyone became a farmer, during COVID. And so that's the key, I think, is continuing to educate them on handling on our digital website. You're able to have FAQs on best handling, shelf life. So I think it really starts from all the way from the grower to our warehouse to our associates, then the customers, providing them first something with many more days left, and then giving them different ideas to be able to deliver that. So.
Great. Rich, I think the issue around packaging has been an interesting road, and I think consumers are finally getting their heads wrapped around that packaging does play an important role, yet they want to minimize, unnecessary or non-reusable packaging. How does Walmart balance regeneration goals while keeping that customer experience the same or improved?
It's a trade-off, and I'm glad you called that out. The functionality of packaging is a good thing, right? There's waste offsets. There's clearly, with some of the technology that's going on, both on the bulk side and the packaging side, the films have gotten exponentially better since when I started in 1997. So things have continued to improve, I think, in packaging. So it's always a push-pull. I think it's good to have that natural tension for me. But I think for us, really, again, the customer decides what they want. And when we think about packaging, apart from the functionality that is online, there's waste and other things, we're trying to figure out how do we make it less bad, right? So things like compostability, that's one of our goals. We're striving to have 100% compostable packaging by 2025. We're about 58% there, 60% there right now. But I think those are the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we look at unit size, again, to drive less waste, to do other things, as well as think about how do we figure out ways to utilize packaging and take advantage of some of the technology to develop better packaging that's probably, that can, again, contribute to our regeneration goals.
Yeah, and I think they're finally getting their heads wrapped around the functionality, which is, credit to all these retailers that really promote that to the consumer and help educate them. So thank you for doing that.
But one of the other things you actually talked about earlier too in one of our calls was the idea of how to recycle, right? So making consumers aware of how to handle packaging is super important. I think again on that we've got about 88% compliance. So we're driving to those. How do we make the consumer aware, and then at the same time, how do we think about it? Work collectively with the industry to drive it. And ESG is ESG has an important role with investors as well too. I think as you as you all think about your companies too, ESG is something that we definitely want to be a part of.
And it really resonates with the younger consumers. I was telling Kristen in the earlier session where we talked about food waste and social, responsibility. When I was listening to the questions, I think every question was coming from someone under the age of 35. I mean, they're passionate about it. They want to see the environment last for a long time and responsibility. Hey, while we get ready for questions, I thought I'd have some fun with you guys and do a quick speed round. So this is 1 or 2 seconds, quick answers. I'll go up and down the panel and just get it from you. So how will 2023 look? Mike?
Resetting, challenging.
Jeff?
Unit rebound.
Rich?
Choiceful.
Biggest challenge in 2023, Rich?
Prioritization, always.
Jeff?
Sales.
Trade-offs.
Biggest focus in 2023, let's start with Jeff.
Sales.
I'm going somewhere else. I got to go mental health. I think it's
Mental
important.
health.
Important. From a
Mike?
team perspective.
Health versus value.
This would be tough in 2 or 3 words, but biggest thing suppliers can do to help you in 2023. Mike?
I think it's the transparency that was talked about earlier, right? Upfront, transparency, engagement. We can partner together. We can work through situations. That's key, I think, is the transparency and partnerships.
Jeff?
Timely informations and sales.
I'm seeing a theme from you, Jeff.
I concur.
Okay, your favorite fruit and your favorite veg. Rich?
Grapes and romaine lettuce.
All right, Jeff?
Avocados. I like broccoli.
Being a Maine boy, is wild blueberries for Maine as well as the potatoes.
I had to tell him lobster's not a fruit or vegetable. Okay, March Madness is upon us, okay? Tell me your team that's going to be there, and what are you going to be serving during the Final Four? What's your team?
Yeah, Rick and I talked about this. I would love to say the Maine Black Bears, but that's not going to happen. So I have to go with UNC. Always a Jordan fan. It takes me back through there. And it will be veg snacks. It'll be a veg tray.
Jeff?
The Kent State Golden Flashes of the MAC. And I'll be serving avocados.
Rich?
Argentina. I don't follow basketball, but I would say actually being from the West Coast, I have to go with UCLA because they're in there, they're doing well, and I'm a California boy. As far as what I'm serving, I was going to say celery, but I think I'm going to go with snacking tomatoes from Florida.
I give all 3 of you big props because none of you picked a Southeastern Conference. You weren't trying to suck up to the crowd. You went with your loyal schools. That's great.
I did
have
have somebody
basketball
tell me
teams down
FSU,
here?
but I said
Do we have any questions? We have mics in the room. It's a great opportunity to kind of chat with the retailers, and we have a few minutes to take some Q&A.
We'll have to have that discussion.
that's right.
Anyone?
That was an interesting game.
Yes.
Yes, I see a hand up.
Gentlemen.
There we go.
We talked about the trend of people buying less more frequently. Do we see that in package size? For example, the mix of 2-pound strawberries and 1-pound strawberries, or smaller size packages or in bags. Do we see that trend reflected in the assortment? Are we going to become like Europe and have like stuff in little 150-gram packets with lots of plastic?
Yeah, I'll be the data geek answer to go first. Yes, we absolutely are. And in fact, across categories, candy, meat, produce, there's actually a little bit of a bifurcation happening. And a lot of it has to do with income, where for items where you can save over time that have shelf life, we see people move to larger pack sizes in order to save. But in a lot of other areas, we are seeing people go to that smaller pack size, figuring I can have my fruit or veg but we'll just make it stretch a little bit longer. So we're definitely seeing, and that is the danger. I've been working with some retailers to introduce some of those smaller packages, maybe for mix and match, those kinds of things. And when you do that, there is that danger where people will buy the smaller package. So I see both ends of the spectrum growing. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, from our perspective, I think, more than 50% of people have altered their kids' lunch, right? So clearly things are going to happen like that. I think the customer goes to the store not with a percentage or a half weight. They go to the store with an amount of dollars. And so when they're at that store with $15 to spend or $20 to spend for a particular meal, they're looking at what can they get for that $15 to $20. How do I feed my family with the money that I have today? So package sizes, to your point, certainly drive and will continue to drive how we retail.
Let's go over this side, and then I'll bounce back to the other.
Right, well, I was hoping that y'all could help us a little bit. As a manufacturer, we have a fresh, frozen, boiled peanut in a microwavable bag. And one of our biggest challenges with produce is that, as we've talked about a lot in this presentation, we're looking for shelf life. Our product is a frozen product, but operationally, bringing a frozen product into the produce section is a challenge, right? Do you all have any advice for those of us looking to overcome that hurdle?
Do you have any contacts in the freezer industry? You can help us with some mobile freezers. We'll drop them right in. We have plugs, so.
If you got power, you're okay.
We have power, 120 and everything. No, I'm not 100% sure how you're going to get a frozen product over there. I'd love to bring it into the produce department. I'll sell ice cream too. I don't care if it's sales.
All right. Well, we provide the freezers. You put it in the produce section?
I think it's a very challenging question as we think about canned and frozen and how fresh plays within there. I know it's very difficult. Like I said, real estate is expensive. We all have strategies that we believe. We talked about the visualization of what produce delivers and stuff, and I can just say it's something that we continue to have conversations, but it's still today what we've seen more of a center store driven item than at least in the fresh produce today. So.
Thanks for your question. Let's go over to this side.
So coming from the production side of the industry, I really appreciate all of your comments regarding consumer and retail trends. My question was actually inspired by Rich when you made the comment around innovation, and you encouraged any grower or supplier to come to you with innovation. Let's work through that and let's find new opportunities within the space. But to my knowledge, a retail landscape that is driven by SKU optimization or SKU minimization sometimes, do any of you have any feedback on who the true gatekeepers are for bringing about innovation or new technology? Is it actually at store level? Is it directors of produce or individual category managers? Or is it truly the consumer that we as growers and suppliers need to be convincing on innovation?
I mean, richard.gonzalez@walmart.com. LinkedIn is really a pretty easy way to connect with understanding structures. It's complicated to understand business structures, no question about it. So I think your question is like, who do I go to with my innovation? Is that correct? It's kind of hard to hear from me.
It's more so I'm representing Bayer Crop Science, and this is something that from a technology side, we've had conversations at the retail landscape with regarding.
So for Bayer, it would be michael.yates@walmart.com. No, and actually we're pretty connected with Bayer, I think, already. But I think in general, it's just getting into the produce, trying to find a leader within produce. And then it's always hard to get traction, no question about it. And believe me, I don't know how many you get, but I get like 15 of these things a week. So it's really about how do we filter through a lot of it. But I think, really persistence pays off and continue to drive it that way. But
Great.
Thank you.
Let's go over to this side.
All right, it's my turn now. There's been a lot of conversation about the TikTok, social media, and the insatiable appetite that we see for consumers for a number of things. One of which that was highly rated was the need they have for education of where their product come from. And as a content creator in that specific realm, what I find really interesting is I can create a video that has or will reach millions of people. But what we don't get is there's still a disconnect between content creators that are creating what you need from a content standpoint, but being able to get that to you and your customers at the store level, on a consumer level. And that's, I mean, it's an individual problem or a problem between producers and the retailers, but I think the industry as a whole could do better. And I wonder how we take the content that we create, the obvious appetite and need for education, and get a win-win-win for everyone involved.
Yeah, and just so everybody, Shay, you do a ton of TikToks. They get millions and millions of views. In fact, I often use your videos to show the watermelon one where you show how people hand things off and just how you preserve your onions and all of that. So yeah, it'd be amazing. How do we take his audience of millions of people and not recreate necessarily everything at retail, but how do we take advantage of popularity of people that, you know, are in there?
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, it's great, right? There's so much content. Every grower, supplier here is trying to get their brand out there, their recognition. We're trying to have our brand differentiate, and so how we bridge that gap is that continued, as we talked about, transparency, the conversations that are needed, because everybody here has a story. And the consumer only has so much attention that we're going to be able to do that. And so knowing our strategies, knowing where our focuses and values are, helps as you engage with us to be able to then say, is this relevant content? How I could support your strategy may make it more relevant than, hey, I want to make, this is my brand and I think it's important. So that would be the advice that I would say is continue that transparency and communication.
All right, we got time for one more.
Hi, my name is Cooper Cable, and I'm representing NC State University. And first off, thank you guys for being here. I just had a question about, as the sort of trend of people wanting more local sourced produce, what are you guys doing to sort of increase that supply of local produce in your stores and sort of supporting local farmers?
Well, we continue to onboard local farmers all the time. Is that what the question is? It's something that we continue to work with the folks. We try to get them up to speed on, you know, GAP and all the other things, the compliance they need to get with. But it's just something, if you believe that it's, yeah, that's so good. If you believe that's important, you just continue to do it, right, with locals. So, again, we reach out. We use, a lot of times we use the store teams that we work with. They actually communicate to us. We ask them, if somebody comes in, do you know somebody local? Someone local, that kind of thing, and then bring them to our attention. We vet it out and we get it in, if that answers it.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, I want to thank everyone. Hey, I want to thank these three individuals. I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor. I'm going to video this. I want you to show some appreciation to our panelists. Would you please?
Oh, yeah, we got a standing one.
Oh, wow, good.
And the guy sitting down. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully these conversations will continue on the show floor. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Anne Marie.
Pleasure. Thank you both.
Really, I mean,